So it was just announced that Pfizer has received approval in the UK for their vaccine. Now, this is a drug that they developed in partnership with a German company called BioNTech. And this is the first approval in any Western nation. I don't know about elsewhere in the world, but the first approval for a vaccine that we've had. And so this marks a really interesting point for a lot of pharmaceutical companies, in particular if you're looking at this from an investment standpoint. So as a result, we've seen an upswing in Pfizer's stock price. It's actually been trending upwards for the last week or two as we started learning more about the results of the clinical trials. So is it now time to look into this stock if you're not already invested in it? In this video, I'm going to explain what you need to know about Pfizer and the stock and whether it's a good idea. So stay tuned. Hey folks, Richard Walls here and welcome to the channel. If it's your first time, what it's all about is helping you with career development and personal finance. And if that's the type of content you want to see more of, do make sure to subscribe down below along with hitting the notification bell so you get notified of when I post new content. And of course, if you like what you see in this video, make sure to hit that like button as well. It helps out my channel quite a bit. With that said, let's get to it. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the UK has just approved this new vaccine, and because of that, we've seen some positivity in Pfizer's stock. Now, if you're looking at this from an investment standpoint, what I want to caution you on is buying into the hype. Now, that being said, it's great. I'm glad that there is some headway being made here with a vaccine, but from an investment standpoint, in my view, it's not enough to warrant buying into the stock for that alone. It depends on what your goals are. If you're looking to maybe speculate a little bit and try to time the market or time the stock price, that's going to be a roll of the dice as it relates to this vaccine. If you really wanted to do that, you should have done it a long time ago, because as we went into this year, there were a lot of companies that were, the whole world's focused on this. There were a lot of companies that were trying to develop their own vaccine. So if you really wanted to place your bet, so to speak, you would have done it then, and you likely would have spread it out amongst a few companies, Pfizer being one of them, Johnson & Johnson, AstraZeneca. There's a good handful of companies out there, GSK. There's a handful of companies out there. And for that reason, it's difficult to look at this as a good opportunity just because they have the vaccine, because again, there are other candidates out there. There are other trials going on with other companies. Moderna is another company that's made a lot of headlines. They are a newer company. So from an investment standpoint, like I mentioned, it depends on what your goals are. If you're looking to get in and get out pretty quickly, this is going to be a roll of the dice. But if you're looking at this from the standpoint of a possibly value investor or a long-time investor, in my view, now is as good a time as any to get into the stock. It's a very old company. It's been around forever, and it's not going to go anywhere anytime soon. It's had its, in fact, I'm going to share my screen really quick. I'm going to walk you through a few details that I wanted to share with you, especially if you're looking into pharmaceutical stocks or biotech. Let's look at Pfizer. Now I've got this chart out to 5 years, and let me expand that out to max when it first, went public in the 80s. You see we had a high in 2000 of around $45 per share, and it recently hit another high back in 2018, and now it's starting to approach that again. But it's been in that band, and of course it's had its decline and then back to where it was many years back. So in terms of getting some good appreciation out of this stock, I don't see a whole lot of it here. I think as far as just one component in your portfolio, I think it's fine, especially when you look at the dividend yield. That's not bad. But again, it's not going to be something that grows tremendously, especially not because of this recent news. Trading on the news is not going to be all that fruitful, especially in the long term. Maybe short term if you happen to time it right, but again, that's a roll of the dice. So if you wanted to invest in Pfizer, what I'd recommend you do is check out a few things. One, I'm going to go to Morningstar here and just look at what their financials look like over the past few years. I find Morningstar to be pretty helpful in looking at this fairly quickly. But if you look at their revenue over time, their income, EPS might be just an easier metric to look at. You'll see it's kind of been within a certain range. It hasn't really moved out of a certain band. We don't see any kind of breakout that's happening. And of course, if there was a breakout, the stock price likely would have done the same thing. But we haven't seen that recently. And if you can hear my computer in the background taking off like a jet, this happened in another video as I scroll through different pages. But that's what you're hearing. Hopefully this mic does a good enough job canceling that out. So you'll see over time, nothing too wild is happening. Again, it's a very old company, and to me, it's sort of like the Exxon of pharmaceuticals. Not actually Exxon, but it's in that same category of established legacy companies. So again, if you're looking for something that's going to appreciate quite a bit in a short amount of time, you might be looking at somewhere else. But again, from a value standpoint, what I'd recommend you do is go into, for example, their pipeline. And I would need to do further investigation here, but I would look at what they currently have for their product pipeline. What's in phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and what has been registered. Now keep in mind, a lot of drugs take 10 years to get to market, and that's if they get to market at all. There have been a handful of different studies done, or I guess we wouldn't call them studies, but metrics that have been thrown about that show what percentage of drugs actually make it from discovery to going to market. And the percentage is very small, and the cost is incredibly high because there are so many failures along the way. But again, if you're looking into Pfizer, it's a fairly stable company. If there's anything here that you might want to look into that would insinuate or suggest that the stock could potentially break out, it's going to be in the product pipeline. They've got a lot of products, or at least a lot of drugs in the pipeline. You'd have to go into each and every one of these, and or alternatively, one source I like to go to is Seeking Alpha. That's a really good resource to get different opinions and get different thoughts on different stocks. And in this case, you might want to find out which one of these candidates, these drug candidates, have a good market potential. And not only that, what seems to be furthest along in the clinical trials. You'll see across all the stages, phase 1 through 3 and registration. But again, it can get to phase 3 and still fail. Like I mentioned, it's very tough to bring something to market. So just keep that in the back of your head. Don't get too excited. This vaccine's a little bit different, of course. A lot of things are being fast-tracked. This is actually moving exponentially faster than most drug candidates would be moving at. So something to keep in mind, just go in here and investigate a little bit further. If you were to buy Pfizer and have that as just one component of a more complete portfolio, it's probably not a terrible idea, and this is as good a time as any, I would say. And then again, you can go into some of these studies. I've got a link here, and just to give you an idea of how long some of these studies actually take, and I believe this is just for phase 3 clinical trial, actual study start date 2016, 4 years ago, April 25th, so a little 4.5 years ago. Estimated completion date in 22. Of course, there's a primary in 2019 that finished, but nonetheless, it takes a good amount of time. This is just phase 3 alone. But that's what I'd be looking at here. Now, just to give you some comparison points, we can also look at some other companies that are in this race. And some that I've compared here that you can see on my chart, these are your deltas. These are your price changes. And I believe this is on a weekly cadence, so week over week price changes in the stock. And the three that you see down here, these are your established legacy pharmaceutical companies. And I've got J&J on here, I've got AstraZeneca and Pfizer. Now the ones that you see here up at the top is Moderna and BioNTech. Now both of these companies are very new. One of them started in 2008 and the other one in 2010. So they're fairly new companies. And to my knowledge, none of them have any approved drugs at this point in time. Of course, they've got a pipeline like many biotech companies do, but they haven't brought a drug to market just yet. This vaccine could be one of the first that they do it with. So that's why you see the stock price go up as high as it's going. There's other reasons behind it too that I'm not going to get into too much detail with this video. But nonetheless, that's what you're seeing there. If you're looking for a potential growth stock, these would be two companies to look at. I think right now it's wildly overvalued. So I'd be cautious in getting into them now, because with that spike in the stock price, you're going to have a lot of institutional investors, I would imagine, and just retail investors selling off at the high point, because you don't know what's going to happen, especially if these spikes are due to the news of the vaccine. Because again, there are other companies in the running that are showing some promise as well. So any one of those companies could succeed. It could be multiple companies. So there is going to be likely some competition here. So again, those two companies in particular, it's a bit of a risk, because they are new companies and that would be their only drug in the market that's going to be competing with established pharmaceutical companies. Granted, Pfizer and biotech, they're paired up in this instance, but nonetheless, when you're you're placing all your bets on just one product in the market, the other ones aren't going to come for a while. In fact, I've got Moderna's pipeline pulled up here, and you'll see that the vaccine here at the top, phase 3 in commercial, pretty close. It's been fast tracked. The rest of these, phase 2 seems to be where most of them are at. So it's going to be another, I would imagine, 5 to 6 years before, and again, I don't know at what stage these phase 2 trials are at what point in the study they're at, but again, it's going to take quite a bit more time for any of these to even have a chance at phase 3, and even past that, going to market. So a lot can go wrong when it comes to development here. And one resource that I pulled up a moment ago, I thought was really interesting, and it goes through exactly, if you're looking into investing in pharmaceutical or biotech for that matter, this is what the process looks like. I wish it had some of the percentages here and the statistics and the timelines. Of course, the timelines can vary a little bit, but here's what you're looking at. It's a long process. So again, to invest in some of the biotech companies that are looking into vaccines today, it's going to be a risk. But for Pfizer, an established company, not as much of a risk. They have a broad portfolio already. They're established. So, but again, it wouldn't be an investment I would make solely due to the vaccine. That's going to be a very small component of what they do. I don't see it yielding, a return, as bad as that sounds to say, because the focus is just getting people healthy, getting the population healthy and potentially immune to this. But I'll post this in the description so you can take a look at that. And I think it's very interesting. some of the metrics here. $2.6 billion cost. And this is an estimate, of course. A lot of drugs fail, and this is accounting for all those failures that it takes to bring a drug successfully to the market. But again, I'll put this on here. To cap it all off, Pfizer, as a part of a more complete portfolio, it's as good as any pharmaceutical stock out there. You can make arguments as to there's other companies out there, J&J, GSK, there's other good companies. But again, as far as a diversified portfolio, it looks fine to me. Now, with all that said, have to obviously do the disclaimer that I'm just giving you my opinion on this. I'm not a financial expert. If you have any doubts, of course, do consult with a financial expert. But hopefully that gives you some context on investing in pharmaceutical in general, but more so of Pfizer and the context that we're all in, with many companies racing to find a suitable vaccine that's going to get approval in various countries across the world. So that'll be it for today. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you around.